overview of the Ford Predoctoral Fellowship. And so we have with us an NSF-GRFP recipient and a Ford Fellow herself, so Rocío, and she is a PhD candidate in cell biology, also here at Yale University. And I just want to give a quick, I guess, history. So I knew Rocío from our phone call the summer before graduate school regarding this very same fellowship, and I was really interested in applying. And so since that very same phone call conversation, I just knew she's a very strong leader in STEM outreach and also incredibly hardworking in the lab. She is genuinely, truly one of the few people I can think of who can lead this webinar and give it its own justice, because again, she's an amazing scientist and also a very strong proponent for increasing diversity and inclusion in STEM. So without a doubt, you will learn so much from Rocío today, understanding all the various things, components that you guys should be addressing, and including in your Ford application, whether that be this year or the next. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Rocío, so please take it away.
Thank you, Daisy. You're always so lovely with your introductions. Hi, everyone. As I mentioned, Daisy mentioned before, I'm Rocío, and I am a PhD candidate at Yale, currently starting my 6th year, and hopefully my last. So today I want to share with you my experience, what it was like for me to apply to the Ford Fellowship, get feedback from people, try to figure out what the application was about, because it's a little different from other types of fellowships in my experience. And so I just want to share that with you guys today and hopefully answer any questions that you guys have about the process and the fellowship itself. So I'm going to give an introduction about what the Ford Fellowship and Ford Foundation are all about. So the Ford Foundation was created in 1936 by the Fords, Henry and Edsel. They created it to essentially fund different initiatives. Some of those include scientific and educational organizations, also other charitable purposes, and just for the public welfare. It did start as part of the Ford Motor Company, which is something that people ask a lot, and me, myself, I didn't know exactly if that was the case when I applied to the fellowship, but it's no longer part of the Ford Motor Company. It divested itself from that, and in 1974, it became its own public foundation. And nowadays, it continues to support different things like higher education, the arts, which is something I really love about this foundation because they're just like very broad, and the Ford Predoctoral Fellowship is a reflection of that. It's also a very broad fellowship. It's not just STEM focused. And it just brings a lot of different people with super different backgrounds and ideas, and it's amazing. They also support economic development, civil rights, and the environment, among other areas. It is one of the wealthiest charitable foundations, and this is not, this was not updated this year, so it might be even a little bit more or less, but last year it was still in the 7th wealthiest charitable foundations by endowment in the US. So even though it's one of the wealthiest charitable foundations, they don't offer that many grants to individuals specifically. They focus more on organizations and other foundations. And that's why they don't offer the number of grants that, for example, the NSF offers every year, which is, in the thousands. The Fords offer less than the NSF. And that's just one of the reasons why people have asked me that question before. If it's one of the wealthiest, why don't they do more fellowships every year? And it's not really the main focus of the foundation, is essentially the answer to the question. An overview of the fellowship program: it is offered through the National Academy of Sciences of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. The goals of the fellowship are to increase faculty ethnic and racial diversity in colleges and universities, to maximize educational benefits of diversity, and last but not least important, increase the number of professors who can and will use diversity as a resource for enriching the education of all students. So something that all these 3 different goals have in common is the word education. This fellowship is super focused on funding and helping the next generation of teachers and faculty to go and teach in their own diverse ways, bringing their own cultural and experiences to the academic environment. That is something that this fellowship is really focused on. So if you know that you in no way will end up in an environment where you'll be teaching in some way, shape, or form, this fellowship might not be the best fit for you. And I'm just saying that from a place of honesty. There's a lot of other fellowships that are still available for you if teaching is not something that you consider a goal for your career professionally. So I just want to say that from the start. Fellowships from the Ford Foundation are made at 3 different levels: predoctoral, dissertation, and postdoctoral. And I only have experience on the predoctoral fellowship, and that's what this presentation is focusing on. But I have a good network of people who have gone through the dissertation and even the postdoctoral fellowships. If that is something that you are interested in, I can definitely put you in contact with those people. So they offer approximately 70 predoctoral fellowships every year. And you should keep in mind that this is in all the different areas. So it's not just for STEM. I don't have any insights into how they divide those 70 spots, if they try to make it somewhat equal among the different topics and areas of research that they fund. I don't have any insights of that, but I can say that they do fund a good number of STEM predoctoral students because of what I've seen at the conferences. There's a good amount of posters and people in the sciences. So I don't think it's anything to be afraid of or shy away from this fellowship, because they do not offer that many fellowships every year. So they also offer 35 awards for dissertation and 24 postdoctoral awards every year. These numbers are not set in stone. They change a little bit every year, but that's just kind of like an average of what they've done in the past. And today they are more than 3,300 Ford Fellows. And it's kind of amazing to see people. I was just telling Daisy that you go to these conferences and you see people that are old, and people that went to school decades ago and are Ford Fellows, and they're so proud of it, and they know each other so well. They know the new people. It's amazing. This network it's incredible. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slides. I see we have a question. 70 awards out of how many applications? I don't know how many applications. I do know from a point of reference that it is considered to be more competitive than the NSF, for example, just because of the amounts of fellowships they give every year. I don't know if it means they receive a similar number of applications and or if they receive less, but they still are giving a lot less fellowships every year. I can't really comment on that. I'm not sure, but don't be discouraged about that. That's all I'm going to make very clear throughout this presentation. Okay. So why should you apply to the predoctoral fellowship? First of all, applying is free. You don't lose anything. You don't lose time if you don't get it. You're not bothering anyone asking for letters of rec and then you don't get it. That is nothing to be ashamed of, or you shouldn't shy away from applying to this fellowship for fear that you won't get it, because it's free, you won't lose anything, and it's a great opportunity to improve your grant writing skills. And I feel like no other fellowship, because of the way the different statements of these fellowships are structured, I think it's very different from what I've seen in other fellowships. So it's a great way of just learning how to write something super concise in a very different way and to a very broad community. So it does cover your stipend up to $27,000. They upped it from past years, which was $24,000, if I'm not mistaken. And they also cover part of your tuition for 3 years. And all of this is within a 5-year period. And that is a flexibility that a lot of fellowships for grad school have, to make it just a little bit more flexible for the students to be like, okay, I don't need the fellowship this year because, you know, we have a training grant and I don't think it's important right now for me to have it. So I'm just going to put it on hold for when I'm a 3rd year, for example, and I no longer have a training grant from my school, then I'll start this fellowship. However, the Ford is a little different in the sense that it makes you be on tenure, which is it makes you have the funding the year after you get it, but just for that 1 year. So if you get it this year, you apply, you get it this year, you will have to be on the fellowship in your next year. And I think they do that to kind of welcome you to the community because, like, as I mentioned, it's a really great network. And they probably just do it for you to be included in that community and have the opportunity to go to the conference early on. After that year, if you don't want to continue with the fellowship, you can put it on pause and you can continue with it the remaining 2 years in the other 4-year spans that you have left. I think we're having some questions on the chat group. Okay, who reviews the Ford Foundation Fellowship? So to my understanding, they usually recruit Ford fellows from the past. They might reach out to other faculty in different universities that are not necessarily Ford fellows, but a lot of the, older, more senior Ford fellows are always reviewing the application. Are white people who are diverse in other ways eligible, or is this fellowship specifically for racial, ethnical minorities? So it is not specifically for minorities. However, you must demonstrate in your application that you have done things in the past and that your career goals align with diversifying in any way the future, academic setting. So if you are a person that is not from any of these diverse backgrounds, but you are super involved in outreach and initiatives to, increase diversity in STEM, that is great. And you are still eligible to apply for this fellowship. Okay. So other reasons why you should apply, most schools compensate external fellowships. And I know that, for example, if $27,000 is less than what your peers at your current university are getting for stipend, universities will usually match that so that you're not getting underpaid. It's not like you're being underpaid for getting an external fellowship. And besides that, some universities even give you a bonus. And that depends a lot on the university, even the departments within the same university. But there is an opportunity that you will increase your salary. And that is the, kind of like more financial reasons and just to improve your grant writing skills. But also, if you are awarded the fellowship, you have the opportunity to attend the Conference of Ford Fellows, which is like hands down the most incredible conference I've ever been to. In many ways, it's just so different. And I don't know if it's because there's people from so many different backgrounds and so many different, it's not just STEM, there's a lot of sociology and other types of academics there. But, as I mentioned before, the Ford Foundation is very involved with social justice. And between your academic sessions, you would have these workshops where you could go and they would be talking about, grassroots movements or like how to be involved in social activism, which is like amazing for a scientific conference. And I couldn't know, I wanted to like clone myself and go to like all the different workshops because they happen at the same time. And I was just like, but I don't want to miss anything, And they have great resources. I really I don't want to sound cheesy, but I feel like that was my family the moment I stepped in. And like, we still have a WhatsApp group, like the people who met at the conference, and I haven't seen them in like 2 years, but we still talk to each other and keep up with each other. It's just like an amazing network. And you can stay connected through that network by a listserv, and it's really active and amazing community. They post, job offers, or, they celebrate each other. If someone publishes a paper or a book, or it's featured in a magazine or something, like anything, if someone gets a job, they just like put it there, and you can go and just like, congratulate and just make connections like that. So those are all the reasons why you should apply to this fellowship. And that's me presenting in my first Board of Conference Fellows, which was supposed to be in Puerto Rico, but Hurricane Maria happened and they had to move it to Washington, which is still okay. Washington is great, but okay. So, okay, we have some comments and questions. Are the people reviewing from your general field, or could they be completely unrelated? I think they try to at least match it in terms of STEM, but of course, if you are from STEM, but it could be someone from a completely different area in STEM. So as a rule of thumb, you should always make your proposal and your research statements just very easy to read for anyone that is not even in STEM fields. That's just good practice for writing grants. But in general, I think they try to stick at least to STEM fields, but maybe not your particular area of research. For supplementary materials, should I include CV and a manuscript of publication that I have done, or just only transcript letters of recommendation? So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. If I'm not mistaken, I think there was an area within the application where you could kind of put your achievements that was like outside of the 3 statements. Daisy's, yeah, okay, I'm not remembering that wrong. So it's not really like a CV, but you can put your achievements there, and also any manuscript or anything like that. So there's an area for that in the application. Okay. So who is eligible to apply? Another reason I love this fellowship, anyone can apply. So US citizens, nationals, permanent residents, students who are under DACA, or students who maybe the DACA have lapsed, but they continue to meet the criteria, political asylees, refugees, regardless of race, national origin, religion, gender, age, disability, or sexual orientation. So essentially, anyone who is pursuing a PhD can apply to this fellowship, which is great. Some people can apply to things like the NSF, for example, or other NIH grants. So you should be looking for fellowships like these. In addition to that, eligible for application are individuals who are committed to a career in teaching and research at the college or university level. And I'm bolding that there. I talked about it at the start, but it's really important that that is one of your main goals in your career, that you really want to go and teach and help diversify the academic field, whatever field you're particularly in. You have to be enrolled or planning to enroll in an eligible PhD or Science D degree at a US institution. So that means that you could be a senior in college right now, and you could apply to the Ford Fellowship if you're also applying to grad school, obviously. So that means that you have plans to start your PhD in the fall of 2021. So individuals who, as of the 2021 fall semester, require a minimum of 3 years to study to complete their PhDs. So that means that because PhDs are kind of variable, some people take 4 years, some people take 5 or 6 or 7. They ask that you at least have 3 years to complete. And they ask your PI, I believe, for a letter vowing that, indeed you do have at least 3 years to complete. So that means that if you're a senior in college, if you're a first year, a second year, even a third year, you can apply to this fellowship. If you're a fourth year, even if you plan on graduating in 7 years, that would still be 3 years. I would think that it would be better for you to apply to the dissertation. That is not set of stone, you know, I'm just kind of saying that based on what I've seen. But if you're up to a 3rd year, I feel like the predoctoral fellowship is a good option for you. Is there a limit to how many times you can apply to the fellowship? No, you can apply as many times as you want. There is no limit. You can even apply as a predoctoral, then you get it or you didn't get it. Then you can apply as a dissertation, and you can even apply as a postdoctoral. I know people who have gotten a few of these fellowships. So being awarded one doesn't mean you're automatically excluded from applying to dissertation or postdoctoral. Okay. So these are positive factors for selection, and I literally copy pasted these from their page. So these are things that you do not have to have, but are positive in terms of your application. So if you have good academic standing, and that doesn't necessarily mean having a great GPA. If you show great academic achievements in research, that is also considered, you know, being in good academic standing. You should show that you are committed to continuing a career in teaching. You should also try to talk about your experience in teaching, and teaching maybe if you've taught in environments of students from diverse backgrounds. That doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, in a classroom. You can talk about any outreach opportunity where you get to like talk in front of people and show them something, you know, that is also part of teaching. If you have any experience in, you know, outreach initiatives or just community engagement with communities that are underrepresented in the academy, if you show that you can use your experience as human beings, as we are, your unique life experiences, your culture, your diverse background, whatever you have that makes you unique, how can you use that in the teaching room and make your teaching just so much better for a diverse group of students? So a lot of teaching things involved. And if you're a member of one of or more of the groups that are considered to be underrepresented, like Alaskan Natives, Black African Americans, Mexican Americans, Chicanos, Native Americans, Native Pacific Islanders, Puerto Ricans, all these groups, if you're part of one of these groups, that's also a positive factor for selection. It is not required though, as all of these are. Can you apply to and accept both the Ford Fellowship and another national fellowship, such as the NSF-GRFP? So you can. I know there are other fellowships that maybe have some, you know, I can speak for a fact that you can have the NSF-GRFP and this fellowship at the same time. You cannot have them both running active at the same time, if you know what I mean. You can accept both. You know, in my case, I accepted the Ford. I was a Ford fellow that first year, and I deferred my NSF. And after I finished my first year with the Ford, I went and switched my status in the NSF to active. And I could have kind of done that back and forward, you know, if I then wanted the next year to have the Ford. So you can play like that with the fellowships. I think that's a common thing. And that's why they build also these like 3 years within a 5-year time plan. So you can kind of have flexibility in that. So if you win more than one fellowship, you can, you know, have both of those, just not at the exact same moment. Okay, so someone is asking, non-Mexican, Chicano, non-Puerto Ricans, Latinx do not count as underrepresented. No, there are many, you know, besides these groups, there are many other groups that count as underrepresented. They do kind of like have a list on their website. So I would go there and check the list that they have. But I can remind you that, you know, there's many ways of being underrepresented. You can come from a very challenging, economic background, for example, or there's just so many, different ways of being underrepresented in the in academia that it doesn't matter if you don't belong to the list that they have or even any other group, as long as you show a commitment to diversifying academia.
So not just ethnic, so perhaps like a socioeconomic background or a gender minority as well. So,
yep.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, there's multiple. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So getting a little bit more into the timeline and the different aspects of the application, excuse me. So the application for 2021 is open right now, and it is accepting applications. The deadline to submit your application is December 17, 2020 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. However, your supplementary materials, which include the transcripts, some verification forms that you need from your PI, that's literally just like a little document they have to sign. It's nothing like outrageous. Letters of recommendation and the host letter, which is a letter from the university, I believe, or like a form from the university. All those are due later in January 7th, 2021 at 5 p.m. So just be aware that those two are not on the same date. And usually they notify people mid to late March about the results. Okay, so we're gonna talk a little bit about each of the components of the application, starting with the personal statement. So one thing about this fellowship, as I've mentioned before, is that the statements are very different, mostly because everything is double-spaced, honestly. So 2 pages double-spaced is honestly just 1 page. So I don't know who they're trying to fool. They should just put 1 page single-space and not get your hopes up when you read, oh, 2 pages. I got space. No, it's double-spaced. So it is very challenging to write something strong and powerful and also make it 1 page long. So in your personal statement, you have to talk about your motivation to do a PhD, any involvement in extracurricular or outreach activities or anything else that you have done. It could be not related at all to science. If you're involved in like something that is, in the arts or something, or just, it doesn't have to be in the sciences, as long as you, talk about those experiences. Any teaching experience, and this includes like tutoring. It doesn't matter that you haven't like TA'd a class in grad school. You can talk about all these different, teaching opportunities if you had elsewhere, even giving workshops or mentoring someone in the lab, for example. Those are all considered teaching opportunities. And you should bring yourself to the table. You should talk about your own background and how that changed you professionally. It is a personal statement, so they are expecting you to show a little bit of personality, I guess, or just like what are you about, kind of. So you should talk about those things. Someone is asking if applications are reviewed on a rolling basis. My understanding is that they are not. You just have this period of time where you can submit your application, but it's not like they offer someone the fellowship before at the deadline. They view everything as a whole. So it doesn't matter if you submit it now or later on.
Rocío, we have a related question regarding teaching. So Amanda has asked, should you only include activities in grad school?
No, that's a good point. I talked a lot about the things that I did in undergrad because I was very involved in undergrad and I was kind of new to Yale. So I didn't really have that many things going on here. So even if it's something you did in high school, that also shows that early on you were super involved in teaching. So I think it's great. If you've done these things early on, you should talk about them, especially if they're significant. if there were big things you did or yeah, it's a really good question.
And I also wanted to note there's a question from Lee Roger, but then Rocío will be shortly going over the proposed plan of graduate study and research as well. So she can address that question regarding the reference.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm gonna show you snips of my statements because that maybe will help you guys like organize yours better, because I know it's very challenging, and even my PI was like how do you get something through in just short time? So this is my personal statement. Essentially, I start talking about why I'm doing a PhD, and that could be whatever reasons you want, whatever reasons you actually motivated you to do a PhD, and especially what got me interested in pursuing academia. I talk about my experiences as an undergrad in Puerto Rico, and how that was different from when I came to the US, like for summer programs, for example, where like suddenly no one was Latino, and like there were hardly any women or African Americans or anyone else that wasn't like a white person, and how that kind of freaked me out. And I saw that kind of like, very different environment, and that scared me, but at the same time, got me really interested in pursuing academia. So I talked about that because that was my experience. I then moved to talking about a lot of the different, outreach and teachings that I was involved in undergrad, because I felt like it was a good transition. I like from early on, like I knew that I wanted to be some sort of an educator, and I did these things, to kind of like get me there. So highlight any teaching experience. Like I said, it could be like a tutoring thing in high school or something that shows that you are interested in teaching. Victor is asking, I'm currently TAing in my first semester in grad school. Should I talk about this experience since the semester ends right near the fellowship deadline? Yes, talk about that. Talk a lot about that. Okay. So moving on in my personal statement. So I kind of divided it. Okay, this is kind of like the first paragraph is why I'm doing this, what got me interested, and any outreach things that I did. Then I moved on to talking about what I was currently doing at Yale outside of the lab. So I talked about the different organizations I was involved in, the different mentorship opportunities I had. And then at the end, I also talked about why I'm doing those things. So don't just like list things, don't be like, I am part of this, and that. Just give them a little bit of context of why you are doing those things. Like, why do you think it's going to benefit you and benefit society? So kind of both ways. What is it going to teach you, and how is it going to make you a better educator in the future? And the last part of my personal statement was all about selling myself. Like, I know like most of us don't like doing that, but unfortunately it's just something that we have to deal with. And just like talk about you, I talked about, why I am applying to the Ford Foundation Predoctoral Fellowship because blah, 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 blah. Like, you have to kind of be very pointed with things that are especially this short, you can't like be, shy about like saying something. You have to just be very concise and clear. I talked about my career goals again. I talked about how I plan to continue work to diversify STEM. And I talked about how the qualities that I've shown so far make me a good candidate for this fellowship. So sell yourself, none of these things are not true, like most of us and you guys are amazing, and we do so many things that are not necessarily academic. So, and that's amazing. So you should talk about that and talk about it in a positive light. I talked about teaching here, and that's just something that I want to say. I talked about in all my 3 statements. So I think that's really important. Just reiterate on the fact that that is your career goal. You want to teach, and talk about it in different ways in all the different statements. Okay, so let me go back to this question. It was related to, okay, no, this was related to the research proposal. All right. So let's continue on. The next statement is the research statement, and is 3 pages, also double space, describing previous research experience. So this is kind of like, they call it statement of previous like scholar productivity or something. So it's just like your background. So here you should talk about your previous experiences very briefly. You don't get into any type of, you know, technical things. You just say, I was doing this, this was the objective. These are overall the methodology I used. Don't get into nitty-gritties of anything. What were the conclusions and what did that teach you? What did it teach you in science, but also what did it taught you that made you a better scientist? You know, it could be, I learned how to be a mentor because I had someone else in my group and I had to organize, and, you know, I learned that people learn differently. So I had to find these ways to kind of like let my mentee, you know, understand what the things I wanted to do, etc. Talk about those things, not just about the science. You can put previous publications, if any. They also encourage you to put like posters and talks, for example, so they don't have to be, you know, paper publications. You can also put your oral presentations and posters, and I'm going to show you how I did that. And also any type of like award that you won, even if you think it's like, you know, like not significant, or like, oh, it was just this thing at a summer program, you know, like talk about those things, because those, you know, those were things that you know, won, and like that are distinctions essentially, and they would, you know, it's good that you write about those things. So someone is asking, how far back can we go in regards to a research experience? I graduated high school in 2015, but I started my journey into science working with an NSF K-12 fellow as a junior in high school. I would talk about that. I feel like it's great that you started early. So as long as you can fit all these things in 3 pages, I feel like that is something you can talk about. And if you can't talk about every single one of them, maybe mention a few, but then go more in depth into the most significant ones. But I would definitely mention that. Okay. So this is part of my research statement. I didn't show the, you know, other 2 pages, but essentially it was exactly like I just said. It was just like, this was my first research experience. This was the objective. I worked doing confocal or staining or whatever I was doing. We learned this, but this experience taught me leadership skills in this. I was also, you know, it was the first time that I had to present in English or something, you know, like that for many of us, that's like a big challenge, and showing that you did that and you did it effectively is really good. So that was, you know, my 2 other pages of research statements. I didn't include a lot about my current research because that's what you're going to talk about in your research proposal. So maybe just mention, you know, now I'm at X university, or I'm planning to enroll in a university in this PhD program, and I plan to look at this, but don't go like super in depth because you're going to talk about that in your research proposal. So this is my last section of the research statement, and this is where I listed past research, you know, publications like oral presentations, posters, any like awards that you got. And in my case, publications I had, I was super lucky to be like in one publication as an undergrad in one of my summer programs. So I just put that there. You don't have to have publications and papers. You know, talk about all the other things, all the other posters and talks that you have if you don't have a manuscript out. Okay, don't focus on technical things. I'm just gonna say that. Lastly, we have the research proposal, and these, this is where you describe your proposed, you know, study, and it's 2 pages, double space, describing your area of study and essentially your field, why the institution or your lab is a good fit for that particular research. So they asked for like very specific things, and I literally, when I was writing this, I would have it like on a side panel because I was like, I need to address all these things, and they're kind of very unique. Like I didn't have to do this for NSF or other fellowships. So just be aware and just go to the point with each of these. And I'll show you how I did that in my application. You have to talk about courses. I thought that was, you know, a little different. It might be because they have so many different fields. And maybe in some fields that's a little bit more important. I feel like in STEM, you know, like what you're doing in lab and the classes you take in grad school are not necessarily like lined up. But I did talk about that, and I like wrote how it was going to help me in my research, which it hasn't, but you still talk about it. Then you include your proposed research and methods and a general timeline. So something you can do with the timeline is you don't necessarily have to write like this will take me this amount of time. You can just put it in like aims, and people think about that as like, okay, like 1, 2, 3, you know, that's your timeline. Essentially just like a path of what you're going to do. Again, talk about your career goals and how this fellowship will advance the applicant's career. So you talk about this in your personal statement, you talk about this in your research statement, just write it everywhere you can. And how does your research impacts community, essentially? And that has many different ways, shapes, and forms. We talk about this in the NSF. You know, many of us, just by being minorities in STEM, are already impacting the community. And it doesn't matter that your research, you know, doesn't necessarily have a direct impact or is not as clear, because I feel like all research really has like a over, you know, kind of like a big picture impact in the community. But you can talk about those things if you feel like your research is not super translational or whatever your concerns are with your research. So I will show how I structured this. My PI helped me a lot with this because I think when I first sent him something, he was just like, no, this is not what they're looking for. You only have 2 pages to address a lot of different things. So you have to make it very organized, and you have to be very obvious what you're doing. So the way we kind of figured out how to do this was literally put like, okay, I'm going to address these 2 things in this paragraph. And then I started by just talking about the area of my research, and I wrote it, research area of interest, you know, and I put everything related to that there. I gave a brief introduction about my research. I said very briefly what will my research program will be focusing on. And then I just added in there, you know, this lab is a pioneer in this field, and that is why I'm doing this in this, you know, particular lab. So address as many points as you can in these paragraphs. So then I did relevant coursework. I just spoke about, you know, my cell bio class is going to help me understand the mechanism of what I'm doing, and my biophysics lab class is going to help me understand and like be better at things like confocal microscopy, because that is like biophysics. I talked about a genomics class that I was thinking about taking because I was planning on doing RNA-seq in my research. And then I also talked about a seminar class that we had to take that will help me in science communication, you know. So even if it's something that you don't think about, like these RIP or like research in progress classes that we have to do, they do have a purpose, and just kind of like blend it all in. You know, this will help me be a better communicator, which will help me be, you know, secure, just like give a talk more efficiently, maybe even get a job. It'll help me get a job at a place where then I can be faculty, and then I can impact this, and that. So all just rolled into that. Okay, I'm gonna answer a few questions I see. So how is the proposal different if you're applying as an undergrad, postbac, and you don't have a PhD lab yet? Should you list a PIs whose lab you would want to be in? Should you contact them if that is the case? That is a really good question. I think that you can briefly then, I don't know if I would go as far as like talking about a specific lab, because you're applying to grad school, you know, so there's a lot of possibilities of where you're actually going to end. So maybe you can talk about the programs you're applying to and highlight, okay, this this particular program has a lot of neuroscience research, and they have pioneers in these techniques. Don't mention necessarily labs, but just show them why you are applying to the places you're applying to and how is that going to benefit your research. So I think that's a good way of getting around that. Can the research proposal be applied in the Ford compared to the NSF, in which the proposal must answer a basic non-biomedical question? So no, the Ford, you can be like, it could be any type of research. It doesn't have to be basic. You can talk about any sort of medical thing, research, as long as it's, as long as you're pursuing a PhD and that is your PhD topic, you will talk about that. So you're not restricted in terms of how translational or basic your research is. Can we also include graduate level classes we have plan to take as graduating senior in our research proposal? Graduating senior. So if you're applying from college, right? If you talk about graduate level classes, yes, I think you should do that. You should do things like that. For example, I hadn't taken like that genomics class, but I was planning on taking it. So I just mentioned it because it is relevant coursework that would help me with my research. For the personal statement, should we focus mostly on our outreach than our research past, right? Should I mention my research background at all of them? So you have the research statement, in which it's a separate statement, which is with the previous one we described. There you talk about all your past research background. Your personal statement is more about you, your career goals, like what are you going to do if you get this fellowship? And then this third statement is more about your proposed research project. So they give you not too much space, but they at least give you 3 different statements so you can address these things as thoroughly as you can into 2 to 3 pages. Do you know of first-year students who have applied basing their research proposal off of their first rotation? I don't know. I might know people. Honestly, I don't. Like, that's not something that I remember talking to with anyone. I know of people that have gotten fellowships off of their rotations. The NSF, I know there are people who got them from the first rotation. I didn't apply to this fellowship in my first year. I didn't know about it. So I applied to it in my second year, so I can't really comment, but I don't think you should shy away, especially because there's no limit to the times you can apply. So just go for it. If you're first year and you're rotating in a lab, do it. You're not going to lose anything. And you'll get feedback, regardless. If you don't get it this year, they'll give you feedback and you can improve your application for next year. Okay, so back to the research proposal. That was my first 2 paragraphs. Then I moved on to my project. There is like absolutely nothing in this. Like it's almost nothing. Like I don't even, it's called a research proposal, but like it's like two paragraphs of actual research. So that's how much they don't really care, I think, about the research. Like it's more about you and like your career goals and what you've done. Of course, you have to have a proposal that makes sense. It's not like you're gonna write anything, but methods and theoretical framework. Like this is for 2 sentences about what I'm gonna do and why it makes sense. Very short, very concise aims. I had 3 aims. I'm not showing the third one here, but this is what my aims look like. Aim 1, this is, the purpose of my aim. This is what I'm going to do real quick. And this is what we expect to see and what we expect to learn. Aim 2, the same thing. So you don't have to get into any sort of details. That's why it's very different from other fellowships. And I couldn't just take my NSF and like apply to this. I had to rewrite it completely because it's just very different. So, but yeah, don't be afraid of like being very pointed, organize it in a way where it's so easy to read that they won't be, missing out anything. It'll be like, okay, this thing, check, it's here. This thing, it's here. And I ended the research proposal with kind of like a more broader thing about how my research can impact the field, can impact society. I worked in obesity, so that was kind of like easy for me to do. But there's always a way where you can connect your research to the community. And you can also talk about how it's going to change the community through yourselves. You know, if your plans are to become a faculty and be teaching, you can be like, you know, completing this project will give me the tools I need to get a competitive postdoc and to then, you know, secure a job at a faculty institution. And then I'll do all these things to like diversify STEM. You know, you can always talk about it in that way. It doesn't matter that your research is not directly related to impacts to the community. Career goals, again, yes, talk about it everywhere. Talk about it in your personal statement, in your research statement, in your research proposal. Just don't let them forget what you want to do and how amazing you are. And talk about how you will impact society, which is what I just said about, you know, if your project isn't directly related, you can always talk about yourself and how you are going to change the world. So this is kind of the last part of the talk, supplementary materials. They ask for an unofficial transcript, undergraduate and graduate if applicable. So I think you have to submit both, even if you're in grad school. You have to submit letters of recommendation. They give you 3 to 5. And you should have more than 3 just because 3 is the minimum. And if someone last minute, like doesn't just, something happens, you know, life happens and someone can't really submit a letter, you are ensured that you still have at least 3 letters for them to view. I think I did submit 5. And for this fellowship, you know, I feel like it's such a different fellowship that I would give kind of like a different advice in terms of who you choose as a recommender. Usually if it's for the NSF, like I would just always try to say like, choose PIs, you know, choose people who saw you doing research, choose people who know you as a scientist. But the goals of this fellowships are just a little bit different. So I would absolutely ask your PIs, but then I would also ask someone that maybe worked with you very closely in like an outreach program, you know, someone that can speak a little bit more to your abilities as a leader in the community. So don't shy away from that, you know, don't feel like you just have to ask your PIs. You can ask other people that know you at different capacities. And I feel like for this fellowship, that would be a positive thing. So any PIs that you have from summer research experiences, ask them. Even if you haven't spoken to them in 3 years, that's fine. Always try to give them an update about what you're doing, what your project is about, why are you applying to this fellowship, and just kind of like your career goals, because it's something that's really important for this fellowship. Talk to them about your plans and to teach, for example. So yeah, there's a lot of people you can ask. There's a question. Can a rec from the dean, if they know you, your involvements, be a good option? I think so, yeah. If that person can speak well about your involvement in outreach and other initiatives, that would be a good person to ask a letter from. I would maybe add it to the 3, you know, like I would have at least 3 from mentors and then add the other ones from other people.
Rocío, we have 2 questions from our YouTube platform. So the first question, someone has asked, I've taken 3 grad courses as an undergrad. Where in my app should I mention that?
Okay. So I think you should mention that in your, maybe in the relevant courses, which is part of the research proposal. I think it would be most relevant if you can tie that up to, you know, I knew that I wanted to do this. And so early on, I wanted to take these classes because I already wanted to have that knowledge to help me just like have a better starting point for my research. I feel like it's a good place to put it there. You can probably also put it in your research statement if you don't think it fits well. Your research statement is 3 pages long. So if you can fit it there better, then you can also talk about that probably in your like intro or something in that statement. You can be like, you know, this is my research experience, and you know, talk about that, and then be like, because this interests me, I decided to take these grad school courses because this and that, you know. So there, I feel like those two statements would be best. If you can't make it fit in one, just use the other one.
For sure. And we have a second question from YouTube. Are we allowed to, and is it expected to include figures in our proposal? And I'm assuming this is for the research plan statement.
Yeah. I don't remember if they specified that. I would go for no, just because you have so little space that like a figure would just take so much. And like, again, my impression is that the proposal, the research per se, is not the main focus of this fellowship, you know? So I just don't know if I would do that just for something that maybe doesn't have as much weight for them. I honestly don't even know if they accept figures. I think you would have to go to the webpage and figure that out, because I don't remember seeing anything about figures. But I wouldn't sacrifice the space. Like, it's 2 pages double space. Just don't do that.
I will say I have seen a research plan statement that did include a figure, but it was a
Okay.
very small figure that was very like smartly placed in between
Okay.
paragraphs.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of playing around with space. But like Rocío said, it's like, yeah, very limited space. So
Unless it's gonna like increase the, you know, the words that you're gonna put in the text, you know, like maybe if the picture is worth more than what you're being like putting in the text, then maybe it's worth it. Just think about it a lot. It's just, yeah, my advice.
mhm.
I see some UPRM people.
Yes.
Yes, colegio. All right. Okay. So someone is asking, what if I did a summer research experience 3 years ago and I had very minimal interactions with my PI? They were very busy. So do you think that PI will still remember me in my project and write a very good letter of rec? I've never asked this person for a letter of rec before. Okay. So I would ask, you know, I haven't spoken to a lot of my recommenders in a while. I only got like that yearly email of like, I need a letter of rec. I think you should provide that person with a lot of context so they can write you a very good letter. So don't just ask them because they mentored you 3 years ago and then not give them anything to write you a good letter, because obviously maybe what they remember, if they haven't spoken to you in 3 years, is very minimal. So if you have a CV, I would send that. If you have a draft of some of these statements, I wouldn't send all of it. I feel like it might be too much and they might not read it. But you can even do like bullet points in the email, be like, I'm applying to this fellowship because this is what they're looking for and these are my career goals, you know, and I've done all these things that demonstrate that so like anything that you can give them so they can write you a good letter. But I would still ask them and go for it. Don't shy away just because you haven't spoken to them in years. This is their part of their job. And you know, you know, I don't think they'll have a problem with it as long as you provide them with enough information. So where can I put that I had a research experience lined up for this past summer, like an RU program that was canceled? I would probably put that in your research statement. So that document where there's 3 pages for you to fill. I think that shows, you know, that you were very motivated to pursue research at a foreign institution, you know, wherever it was. Usually you don't do those in your same institution is what I mean. And even if it was canceled, you know, everyone, it's a weird year. So like people will understand that. I would for sure talk about that on the research statement. Are there specific things the recommendation should include given the mission of the Ford Fellowship? So I do think that you should make, like I said, what this fellowship is looking for, you should make it very clear, because that will help them address those things. So things that maybe my PI didn't know about me, about like my past teaching or outreach initiatives, I let him know about that, just because I wanted him to talk about those in the recommendation, because that was something important, and let them know about your career goals very specifically. So, you know, I think you should definitely tell them about those things. Okay. So here are just some helpful resources that the Ford Foundation has on their webpage. They're like, these are things that people have said have helped them to write fellowships. I didn't put this here, but I know that Científico Latino also has examples of different types of fellowships, and Ford Fellowship also, I think, I don't know if mine's in there, but I know they have examples of Ford Fellowships in their page too. So for sure, go check those. Go check out those resources. And I know that in the Ford webpage, they also have a list of all the Ford Fellows like that ever existed. So if you can find someone in your institution there, reach out to them. You know, I've like, you know, like Daisy said, she reached out to me like when she was gonna apply, and other people have also reached out to me and other Ford Fellows at Yale. So don't be afraid to reach out. You know, usually we are super happy to help anyone and give you like application materials and everything. So that's also a good way to try to find more resources.
Yeah, so do you guys have any more questions for Rocío?
Yeah, I know the application format is just so different. Yeah, I feel like without the help of my PI, it would have been a disaster, because like I just, yeah, he definitely helped me just like structure it in a way where it made sense, and it was super, super helpful. And I'm sure it just made it clear for the reviewers.
Any last minute questions? Anything at all? Okay. Pedro, they ask, does this fellowship has to be strictly academic or academia related? Can you be committed to public education in general?
I think that it doesn't have to be strictly academia. You know, if you have a very specific goal for, you know, some public education, you know, and if still within that career option, you show that you have a commitment to diversify STEM. I don't think it has to be in the academic level. I would go to their page and read through their different like eligibility and positive factor for selection. They have a lot of information there that I didn't speak about here, and an FAQ, you know. So just comb through those and see if someone else, you know, has asked that question and what the answer is. My belief is that you don't have to be strictly academic, but don't take that for granted. Sorry that I don't have like a direct answer to that. Okay, so if you use similar subheadings, do you think that's a good idea, or we should make our own subheadings? I think that you could, you know, you could do however you write it. It might be like a little different. Just I feel like the idea of subheadings is good. I don't think necessarily they like have to be the same. Like if you're combining two things in one paragraph, that are two of the things they asked for, then just kind of like address that in the subheading. So just kind of write it out and see what feels best, and have a lot of people read it also. Did you feel intimidated when applying to the fellowship? I think that I didn't know how competitive it was when I was applying. I was just like, oh, someone told me about it, and I was just like, I might as well do it. I didn't think about it too much, you know. I didn't, you know, I just took it like how I told you guys. It's just like, it's okay, it's an opportunity to write something, and I'm not gonna lose anything. Um, I was qualifying, I think, or trying to qualify at the moment. So I think it was also a good exercise for me to just write about my research, even though this was like 2 paragraphs on my research. But it maybe it was a good distraction. I don't know. But yeah, I don't feel intimidated. You know, the benefit of getting this fellowship is just so great that I feel like everyone should apply and have the opportunity to be part of the Ford Foundation. So yeah, just get a lot of help and have a lot of people read over your statements.
Awesome. Okay, I guess we can take just one last question. Someone has asked if we have a few back grades.
Yeah.
Explain
Okay.
what happened.
So I think you should probably address that in your, you could either do it in your personal statement, you know, if there's a reason why, like I said, life happens, and I know like a lot of students juggle a million things, you know, like working and studying, for example, or if you have a family and like you're also studying. So there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't necessarily perform well on a class that I think are valuable, you know, to talk about, especially because that is part of your experience, and that's part of what they're looking for. They're trying to look for you to address, how do you think this experience that you had is going to make you a better educator in the future? How will you use that to the benefit of society? So if you can talk about that, you know, if you were going through like a particular illness or something, you know, like there's so many different life things, or if just you didn't do well in the class, even though you studied very hard, you know, that's also something you can talk about, especially if you are still pursuing a career in a field like related to that class. For example, you can talk about how that didn't, you know, shy you away from continuing this path because it is truly what you love to do and what your career aspirations are. So just always talk about it in a way where you could highlight some um, positive attributes that you have and how you overcame that.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for your questions, guys. And thank you, Rocío, for, sharing your wisdom. And we wish you also the best of luck on your Ford application this year and the next, or 2-3 years from now. And for those of you who are in our GSMI community, I will be uploading this presentation in the webinar section in the GSMI members area. But for anyone else, this will be also, this is going to be on our YouTube channel, and you will have access to this presentation at any time at your perusal. So yeah, we have a few more webinars coming up, so please go check it out. Register on Eventbrite, and yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for spending.
So much, everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.